History remembers the facts, but what about the phantoms that refuse to be forgotten? The ones that aren't haunting old mansions, but the dark, deep waters beneath your boat. Tonight, we're tracking down lake monsters, Bessie, Champ, Nessie, and the Native American legends that predate all of them by centuries. The questions nobody wants to say out loud. What if something is actually down there? So grab your favorite drink, dim the lights, and let's go. Let's go in. Welcome. How are you?
Hey,
Welcome back to the
I'm doing well, my
Cryptozoologist.
friend. It's a pleasure being here.
And I think this is the first time you've been just one on one.
It is
Awesome.
my third solo visit with you. I had DAY song on with me last time, and some events that were out of our control forced us to cancel. But here I am, and it's getting to that point now. I'm in Western Pennsylvania. It's getting to the point now where I can actually do these podcasts out on my back porch. Now it's a little chilly yet, but shining and always right in the world.
Oh yes. And for those that don't know you, can you just give a brief overview?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I live in the foothills of the Chestnut Ridge. I lived around here for most of my adult life. Oh, actually, for most of my life, period. During my adult life, I might have moved away for about a year or so, but I've always been centered around this area of Western Pennsylvania. And it has been ever since I've been a kid. I've heard stories about the strange going ons in and around the Chestnut Ridge, from UFOs and Bigfoot encounters. And more recently, we have Dogman encounters. And it's just a fascinating place to be for somebody that's into the paranormal and into the supernatural research and cryptozoology. And that's really what keeps me around here as well, too. And I've written a lot of books about the paranormal things that I find of interest. So I tend to go more towards the cryptozoological. But I wrote a book a few years ago about lake monsters. And actually, Loren Coleman recognized it as one of the best books of that particular year written about lake monsters. So I was very pleased and honored to have that acknowledgement. But yeah, it's just one of those things where this world, we think that it's tamed, right? We have Walmarts every couple miles and we're all linked by roads, but there are areas where few people venture, whether it be the woods or the mountains or the deserts or the swamps. And one of the places is, of course, our lakes here in North America. And out of those conditions, out of those places, come some fascinating stories of the unexplained. And that's why we're here today.
Oh yes, and we're gonna dive into lake monsters. Now
A
you
deep dive.
a deep dive, yeah. So
Yep.
first you mentioned your book. How did that all come about? You focusing in on lake monsters.
Yeah, I was actually, I mentioned Loren Coleman. I was at a conference with Loren Coleman, probably, I guess it's been about 8 years ago now. And we were up in Michigan. We were up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And I remember just taking in awe of that area. That's where we have the two Great Lakes that are clashing together and they meet up there. And it's the first time I've ever seen Lake Superior. And I started to look at the topography around there and I thought, if something wanted to remain hidden in this area, this would be an excellent ecological situation to stay hidden. And then we had the conference on a First Nation reservation. We had it at a casino. And I was meeting these charming folks from the Cree Nation, and they were telling me fascinating stories about the supernatural that is associated with the lakes in and around their region. And I thought, this is the stuff that books are made of. And that's how it all came to pass. It was one of those things where the inspiration actually came to me. It was presented to me because I've always liked the notion of lake monsters and sea monsters. And I had been to Loch Ness previously as well, too, to do some research there, probably going about 20 years ago. But I thought so much has been written about the Loch Ness monster and even Lake Champlain, but very little was being written about Lake Huron and Lake Erie. And I thought these are worthy of mention because all these bodies of water, all these Great Lakes that we have, they all have a particular monster associated with it. So I thought I might as well sit down and put a book together. And that's what I did.
I know you're books, you blend folklore, history, and eyewitness testimony. As a researcher, where do you draw the line between legends worth taking seriously and legends that are just good storytelling?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not sure that I really do. I will look at it with a skeptical eye, but if there's something out there that has been standing the test of time, let us say, then I will include that because it's part of the culture, and not only a part of the culture, but it's a part of the way that we evaluate the area in which that legend took place. So we can't just throw it out because it seems outlandish. And we have to understand that before white people came here, and we're not talking about a very long period of time, but the past 300 or 400 years, there has been millennia of legends and myths and folklore that we have just simply shrugged off because it's native nonsense or whatever. But I think whenever you look deeper into this, when we're talking about almost a deification of these creatures that are said to live in the depths of these Great Lakes, there's something that makes sense from a very zoological perspective. Whenever you look at it that way, then you have to think from a scientific point of view, can it happen? Is this reasonable to have this happen? And from what I've gathered, and of course, I'm not a zoologist or anything, but from what I've gathered, there is enough to sustain a creature or creatures in these lakes. Now, I will point out it's exceedingly possible that some of these legends that have come to us may no longer be existent right now. This is something that may have been killed off in the past few hundred years, but the legend remains. And I think the legend remains is because there was something indeed there on which the legend was based upon.
True. Yep. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with that. So
But
most people,
it's like it's like the Loch Ness monster. People are doing sonar studies and they're doing research and saying there's no way that the ecology of that loch just cannot sustain a creature purported to be the Loch Ness monster size. But what I always point out is the Loch Ness monster was first sighted not in the loch itself, but in the River Ness, which it feeds right into the Atlantic Ocean. So there is no reason to say that at one time there were these creatures that were able to go in and out of the loch because they get seals there, they get dolphins up there. Now they put in the Caledonian Canal, that's a Victorian thing, but I would think up until at least maybe 200 years ago, it would have been very easy for something to come out of the ocean and go in there to spawn or to feed or whatever. And I think that's where the legends have developed. And that's why we still stick with it, is because there's a cultural memory there of things being existed in that water that's no longer there.
yeah, yeah. Now, most people hear Lake Monster and immediately think Nessie. Why do
Sure.
American and Canadian lakes get treated like the minor leagues?
I there's a sense of I think wonder when we talk about the old world. When we talk about 1,000-year-old castles that overlook Loch Ness. And if the loch does not have a monster in it, then it should have something in that. Right now, I like I said, I live in Pennsylvania. I usually go up to Lake Erie about one time a year. And it's something to see. These are great bodies of water that form essentially an inland sea, but it doesn't have the myth and legend that goes around it like old world lakes do. And I think that's really just as simple as that, that we don't have the mystique that goes along with it. But I will tell you, as somebody that's been around the Loch Ness at dawn, whenever the fog is rising, and somebody that's been around Lake Huron and Lake Erie at dawn, whenever the fog is rising, there is really little doubt in your mind that there's a great similarity there, and there's no reason why it cannot be hiding something. Another point that I want to make here before we jump off this, Loch Ness, Lake Champlain, and all of our Great Lakes are basically the same age. They all sprung about 14,000 years ago, whenever the last glacial recession began. And that's why they carved these great channels in the earth and they were filled up with water. And that's why we have them. When we talk about this, we really have to talk about that particular geological history, I should say, because all these lakes fall into that 14,000 year range These are all glacier lakes. And that's also interesting as well, too, because they share that kind of provenance, right? They all developed at the same time. And isn't it interesting? They all have monsters attached to them as well.
It is. That is. It's very interesting that they all
Mhm.
do, even though they were formed out of the
Right.
glacier.
Sure. So one of my theories, now this is a theory, and of course, there's no way to really prove this or anything. And hopefully one of your listeners will reach out and either refute it or debate it or whatever. But when we look at the fossil record around in and around England, right? Especially in the south of England, around Devon, England, we know that Mary Anning, who was an amateur archaeologist, she was the one that first started to uncover things like the mosasaur and the plesiosaur in a region called Lyme Regis. So we know that in the ancient world of 65 million years ago, around England that was surrounded by a very shallow sea, we know that there were, I guess it was underwater at this time, but we know that there were giant reptiles that were prowling about. So this is, again, this is a theory. Is it possible that there was still a remnant population of these large reptiles that simply did not go extinct 65 million years ago at the Great Extinction Event? And is it possible that they were able to stay alive in their oceanic world? Now, we know that mammals survived the meteor. We know that crocodilians survived. And so is it possible then, too, that a certain type of ocean-going reptile was able to survive as well, too? I think it's very reasonable. The coelacanth survived. Now, the ocean has a way of protecting its own. So is it possible that nation of either a plesiosaur or a mosasaur or some sort of prehistoric reptile that was going about the fringe of what would become England? And whenever the glaciers started to withdraw and that opened up these channels, is it possible that some of these creatures that were still surviving in the water in and around England were able to make themselves their way into those locks and eventually become locked in there? And that gave rise to the legends. Lake Champlain is in Vermont, and Vermont is the only New England state that does not border the ocean. Yet Vermont's state fossil is the beluga whale, because there was a fossilized beluga whale that was found right at the area of Lake Champlain. So we do know that up to 14,000 years ago, that there were whales getting into Lake Champlain. So one of my theories is there may have been a remnant population of maybe even an unknown prehistoric reptile that got into these places and was able to survive into early historical times that gave rise to these legends.
Yeah. Now, of the different lakes that you researched for your book, which one generally surprised you and why?
I think the one that genuinely surprised me was Lake Michigan of all places, because their monster there isn't so much of like an intangible, right? Actually, their monster there was a shark, if you can believe it. In 1955, there was a young boy that was swimming in the waters of Lake Michigan, and he was attacked by what they claimed to be a shark. And actually, it's even listed in the accounts of all the sharks attacks that are recorded around the world. So in 1955, we have a shark attack in Lake Michigan. Now, as I've done research, Lake Michigan is also the home of pike and muskie and very large predatory fish. So there's really no reason to assume that this child was not attacked by one of those creatures. But the people that witness it still claim that there was a shark. So is that possible? Absolutely, 100% possible. And we know this because the bull shark is able to very quickly change over between saltwater and freshwater. And we know that the bull shark was caught outside of Elton, Illinois, which is something like 800 or 900 miles away from the ocean. So we know that bull sharks are capable of going up the Mississippi River. We know that they're capable of getting into lakes. Australia has them in freshwater lakes over there. So either it would take the St. Lawrence River or go up the Mississippi and find its way into Lake Michigan. But I think that when we start talking about monsters, not all of them have to be cryptozoological or supernatural. There can be monsters in there in the form of a bull shark that are just waiting to attack, which I think is very interesting. But if you look at a lot of the Native American legends, even here in Western Pennsylvania, there was a talk of a creature called a Nagua that the First Nations folks would say it would come up to the shore and take deer that were getting a drink. And it was kind of like a boogeyman as well, too, telling the kids to stay away from the shore because you never know what might pull them in. But for all intents and purposes, it appears that the Nagua was based upon quite possibly even a shark. If not a shark, maybe an out of place alligator. And it's possible because the alligator, it's been claimed, was probably as far north as the Potomac River at the time of the settlement of Jamestown. And there's nothing to say that there was no alligators even a little bit farther north at one time as well. So, like I said, as we look at these monsters, not all of them are spectacular, right? Although I would think that finding an alligator in a freshwater river or finding a shark in one of the Great Lakes is pretty fascinating in and of itself.
Yeah, so even though they would be considered a lake monster.
They would, and they would be also deemed cryptozoological because they're found out of place. They shouldn't be there. So these
Yeah.
are one of those hidden that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Now, with Lake Erie, I think that their lake monster is it Bessie? If I believe that's her the name.
And Bessie, yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, seen off of a long time off of a point in Ohio. But of all the lake monsters, this seems to be the most plesiosaur like. People have seen it up on land, basking in the sun, the long reptilian neck, the body, the flippers, all that kind of stuff. So people have been seeing these things. And as a researcher, I try to figure out what it may be. So if we say it's a plesiosaur, these kind of things have to have a lot of proof. But you could also say, is it possible it's a form of a freshwater seal that got in there that we just have not categorized? Again, we would find something that would have flippers, pinnipeds have flippers. So it's very possible that these stories are based upon seals that got in there. And we know that Lake Baikal has a population of freshwater seals. So we know within zoology that the possibility exists that could happen. Now, the only downfall about that is there were seals up there. They would probably be seen all the time.
Yeah.
So it might be something that they're passersby or they're infrequent visitors to that area. But I think that if somebody is out on the lake and they already have a proclivity towards thinking that something looks like a Loch Ness monster, and you see something that quickly breaks the surface that has flippers, it's easy for your mind to immediately go to the Loch Ness monster type of creature.
Yeah. Yeah, they very
Yeah.
well. Now, I think that also the Iroquois had, and I'm probably gonna massacre the name, an onair, a horned water serpent, centuries before.
Now, yes, especially this comes to fruition in Lake Superior because we have rock art depicting this creature that actually overlooks the lake itself. Mishipeshu is one of the names that it goes by, and it looks a little bit like an otter in form with these spikes that go down its body, down the ridge of its back. And sometimes it's called the water panther, and it's a deity. It's a protector of the lake itself. But some of the traditions say that it can fly, and whenever it does, it spits fire and sparks. And a lot of UFO researchers think that it might be something extraterrestrial, and it's possible that something like that is going on as well too. But yeah, that's probably one of the most fascinating of all these creatures because we can find indigenous art that depicts it. So it's just not story time. It's just not something that's there. The art will believe was out there in that water.
Yeah. And then I think also just looking at the different ones I found for Lake Superior, or I don't know if you talked about it, but Lake Superior's Pressy.
Yes, that's right.
Do you think that the environment shapes what people are seeing, or does that not matter?
Yeah, so absolutely. The first time that I was at Loch Ness, I was amazed because it sits in a pretty narrow channel. It's a massive lake. It's the biggest lake in the British Isles, but it's about a mile across, but it's still narrow. It's about 27 miles long and a mile across. So it's really bottlenecked in this little glen that cuts through the Scottish Highlands. And the first time I was there, I you can see that whenever the wind plays them, the water immediately starts undulating like a serpent. And you can have a very flat day and just a little bit of wind kicks that up, and it looks like there's a reptile coiling its way along the water. And I think that those kind of ideas definitely inform the way you view the area. And the Celts that survived in that area for thousands of years, they do depict in their rock art something that probably could be defined close to being a kelpie, some sort of water spirit that almost looks like a horse. And we can find that in rock carvings overlooking Loch Ness. So the idea that there was something in there is at least a few thousand years old. And then by 800, we get to St. Columba, who is preaching the gospel, and he comes across this person that was just killed because he was swimming in the River Ness. And one of the gentlemen who was killed, his friend goes out to to retrieve the body, and this great serpent-like creature rises up out of the water again. And Saint Columba tells it to flee and go away. And then in the name of God, it does indeed slink away. But that's really the first time we hear about this. And of course, we can say that this is a pagan ideology being usurped by Christianity. And in a way, that is indeed the case. That is exactly what's going on. Same way that St. Patrick rid Ireland from all of its snakes. Snakes have a very chthonic pagan element to them as well. But that one instance that goes back 1,200 years still sticks to us. And they still have museums. They have two museums in Loch Ness dedicated to this creature that was seen and reported to have killed somebody in 800 AD.
Yeah. Now, moving on to in Lake Champlain, there's been over 300
Wow.
sightings on record and is legally protected by both Vermont and New York. As a historian, what does it mean when the government passes a law to protect a creature that hasn't even been confirmed?
This might be a little bit too cynical of me, but one of the reasons why I think people do that is because it draws in tourists, right? Because what they're saying is we're hedging our bets right here. We're not saying that it exists, but if it does exist, we're going to protect it. So people are naturally going to flock to these areas out of curiosity. Same way with Loch Ness, in exactly the same way. And I'm all for it, because what happens whenever a body of water claims to have a monster in it, or what happens whenever there's a forest that claims to have a Bigfoot in it? People become a little bit more reverent of that area. People become stewards of that area. They want to clean it up and they want to save it and they want to protect it. And I think only good can come out of ecotourism that's associated with these cryptozoological creatures. I really do. Here in Western Pennsylvania, our little town of Derry that sits right at the base of the Chestnut Ridge, they have Bigfoot protected. You can't hunt or harass Bigfoot there either. And it brings people in because people want to believe. And by passing a law like that, you're allowing people to believe this stuff. And I love it. Like I said, the only thing that's going to hurt is, well, I don't think it's going to hurt anything, as a matter of fact. I think it's going to help protect the area more than anything. And then you don't get a lot of people out there with dynamite trying to kill it too.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Now, the Samuel D. Champlain or origin story that I think everybody has heard, and supposedly he saw Champ in 1609, turned out to trace back to a fabricated quote in the 1970s magazine. But the myth is everywhere. How does that kind of thing happen, and does it contaminate the legitimate historical records?
Yeah. So these, like I said, these are great questions. And we will raise another question here. And I think by raising this question, it will answer that as well, too. So a lot of stuff is going on in the Bigfoot world right now. Supposedly, there's a documentary coming out that says that the Patterson Gimlin film is the fake. Okay. And there's also a lot of people out there saying that J. Crew was the first one to put these forms on his feet, these wooden forms on his feet, and start leaving Bigfoot tracks around. And that is how Bigfoot was invented. And that is 100% not how Bigfoot was invented. It was part of the Native American cultural tradition well before people started to pounce around there trying to hoax things or bringing in chainsaws to cut down the forest. So, no way do we create these monsters, right? They're already out there. And the reason why people can hoax it is because the belief is already there. So, I will answer the lake monster stories with that particular Bigfoot story because I think it's analogous. Whether people are faking things or not, we are going to go into a particular area and a particular environment, and we are possibly at times led to believe that there is something in there because we've been informed by prior knowledge that this may be what's out there. So I think whenever we talk about Lake Champlain, whether he saw a sturgeon or whatever the case may be, there is enough evidence out there that there was something strange in that water even before he arrived to keep the legend going. So even if there was something mistranslated, that's one thing. But just because it was a white person saying this does not say that all the native history and oral tradition associated with that should be thrown out because it's still there. And the reason why we believe that those things are there is out of that tradition. Same way with Bigfoot, too, that you can fake it as much as you want, but you cannot throw away 2,000 years of an oral tradition.
Very true. Yes. I would agree with that. Now,
Yeah. A lot of people like to do that because a lot of people like to bust other people's balloons, kick dart into their faces and such. And I think that's unfair. I think that we should be allowed to look at things with wide eyed wonder. And of course, not everything should be accepted at face value. We have to scrutinize, we have to be skeptical, we have to ask the scientific questions. But we are pursuing something that is already marginalized. A lot of people don't already believe in. So as we go out there on our quest to uncover these mysteries, I think that we need to look at all aspects of these. Even we have to think in the hoax, why people are able to hoax these things, and then why people believe in the hoax as well, too. That's because we want to believe. We want to believe that our forests have giant ape men. We want to believe that our Great Lakes have something swimming around in there that we have not caught and captured and categorized. We need these mysteries. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me going. It's very hard to sit here as I look off my porch and think that there might be a Bigfoot a few miles away from me. But it keeps me going because I know that we as human beings don't know everything to know out there.
yeah, we have lots of places to explore and lots of
Absolutely.
mysteries. There's lots of
Right.
mysteries.
And then we come to the oceans and we come to the Great Lakes. We're also talking about not only area, but we have volume as well, too. This is a completely different world. So it's very possible that there are different creatures in different stratifications in the water system as well, too. So there's a lot of places to hide whenever it comes to the Great Lakes. And what happens if these things are even amphibious? What happens if they leave the lakes from time to time? That makes it even more problematic.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Now,
One of the things I brought up in my book was the fossil record. We know that there were salamanders in China that got up to nearly 20 feet. And there are still reports in the Pacific Northwest of giant salamanders. And these, of course, are amphibians. And what's to say there isn't some giant amphibian still hanging around in one of the Great Lakes? And they look very reptilian for someone that just passing by. And we know that they can leave if they want to. So there might be a giant salamander living in some sort of tributary to one of the Great Lakes that enters it every now and then, and somebody on their kayak sees it and they report it as a lake monster.
very true. Yeah. Now, the Sandra Mansi photograph from 1970 for Champy was verified as unaltered, but never fully explained. Where does that sit with you in the overall case for Champy or Champ?
Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of research on the Mansi photo, and there's people out there now that claim that they know what particular piece of bark this comes from. It's nothing more than a log. Some people have used AI and claim that they can see certain types of acorns on it. There was one researcher said that what we think is the neck is actually the arm of somebody swimming. But at the end of the day, we don't know what it is, right? So everybody that sees it can offer their own opinion, and there's really no way to absolutely debunk it because all that we have is the information that's on that film. And you can construe it any which way you like. I can call it a monster, you can call it a swimmer, and just because I call it something and you call it something doesn't make it right. These are guesses. I don't think that the person that took the photograph was trying to hoax anything. I don't think that she was thinking there was going to be making any money. I think that she saw an anomaly out there in the water and snapped a picture of it, whatever that might be. It's very possible she saw a floating log and she didn't know what it was. But because it has been scrutinized under so many different types of data, now we have AI out there and the proliferation of all this kind of stuff, that it's still not been totally debunked. That I think that we must keep it in that kind of setting aside, and it's just simply unknown at this point.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about Nessie a bit, but I had a few more questions kind of on Loch Ness and Nessie. Um,
Sure.
so I did an attempt before I did these interviews, I did an attempt on doing a video on the Loch Ness monster. I don't know if it was a very popular one because a lot of people watch it, but I kind of concluded it could be possibly one of the large eels that that live in the lake.
Yeah.
Now, what specifically about Loch Ness that made it kind of a global benchmark? Is it the evidence, the media machine, or is it something that's actually in the water?
What made it so famous was, of course, the first St. Columba thing, right? That was by far the first one. That's what kind of brought it to the forefront that there is a monster there and a Catholic saint saw it. So, how are you supposed to refute that, right? But what happens was in the 1920s, they start deciding that they were going to put a road in around Loch Ness. So that opens up to travel like never before. So people that only heard about the loch are now able to drive past it. And whenever you get people there, you get eyes there. So one of the first sightings was this creature, almost like a blob type of thing, almost like a walrus type of thing that was undulating across the road with a sheep in its mouth. So, really, some of the first times this creature was sighted was crossing the road. So, we're talking about a beast that's actually outside of the water. And then we have the famous surgeon's photo. And the famous surgeon's photo was kind of really what turned everything upside down because now we see the famous head and neck. We see something that looks like a plesiosaur. We see it in situ, we see it in the environment in which it came from. And that was like the holy grail. This proves everything. And as it comes to be passed now, we have deathbed confessions. We have people saying that this was a head placed upon a toy submarine. All this kind of stuff is going out there. But I would urge you, your listeners, to try to find the surgeon's photo that was not edited. What we see is one where we have a blow up focusing on that famous head and neck. But the original photo, they didn't have telephoto lenses or anything of that nature. So the original photo is a head and neck sticking out in the middle of the loch. And again, the loch is about a mile across. So we have distance. So one of my things is this. One of my points is this. If somebody was faking this and they put a head on a little toy submarine and you put it in the middle of the loch, I don't think that you would be able to see it. That's just my opinion. I think what appears on the photo, and it might still be fake, it's not saying that it's not fake, is something much larger than a toy submarine because you can see this creature with the backdrop of the other side of the loch, the wooded backdrop, and it looks much larger than just a toy. But there's the claims that this particular doctor was having an affair was somebody in England, I believe, and he had to put himself in Scotland, and he had no way to do it effectively unless he came up with this. But I think if I were having an affair with somebody, I don't want to bring it out by claiming that I saw a monster. I think that's the wrong way to go. But a lot of people claim that's the reason why this was fabricated, because we have to figure out, we have to find the answers, right? Especially if we're skeptical to begin with. Now, the Loch Ness also added to a lot of skepticism after this as well, because people wanted to find out the truth. So they hired this big game hunter by the name of Marmaduke Weatherall. And he claimed that he found evidence of a trackway along the loch. And it proved that the tracks were made by an African hippopotamus. And he was able to acquire the foot from an umbrella stand that was sold in one of the curio shops quite close by. And he took that down and impressed it on the wet mud. So we now have somebody that's fabricating evidence so he can be famous for his 15 minutes. So that's usually what happens as well, too. Whether it's a Bigfoot sighting or a UFO, whatever, people jump on the bandwagon and they want to be a part of this. So they start producing their own evidence. But before that, there was really no kind of question that what the picture that the surgeon took was not that creature. That's what he saw.
Yeah. Loch Ness is deep enough that a breeding population of large animals is theoretically possible. Does that change the conversation scientifically compared to shallower lakes like Lake Champlain
Yeah,
or Lake Erie?
I think it does. I think it most certainly does. Although Lake Champlain is actually deep as well too. Lake Erie is a little bit more shallow, but when we talk about shallow, we talk about that in relation to the ocean. Was something like we still have oceanic conditions in Lake Superior. These are still massively deep bodies of water, but yes. So there is definitely room for something to stay hidden, even a population of things to stay hidden at Loch Ness. The whole problem is though, these are probably not air breathing animals, because if they were air breathing, people would see them. The only conclusion that I can come up with is if these are indeed air breathing animals, they have to find a way in and out of the loch. That's the only way that makes sense. That they could not be in there all the time, because, like I said, I just last year I took my family down to the Everglades, and alligators are hard to find. But if you wait around for a while and they're in a body of water, pretty soon their little nose is going to come poking up there and they're going to take a breath. And that's the same way with the Loch Ness monster. So I'm starting to believe that whatever's in there probably is not an air breathing animal. And then we get back to the assumption of that you said about the eel, which is extremely possible. And Steve Alton wrote a book, I don't know, 20 some years ago, called The Loch. And the Loch Ness monster in that was indeed an eel that came from the Sargasso Sea and made its way up into the loch. So it's a fascinating story. I urge anybody to read it. It's really an effective little horror book. But yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a possibility of that, but there's also the possibility of an otter as well too. In Ireland, we have the tradition of the Dobaku there, which is this very large, I would assume it's a sea otter. And we know in the 1800s that somebody was rumored to be killed by this. So a gentleman was his wife was out doing something. This creature comes out of the water, kills his wife. He goes back, he shoots the creature, and then another one of these very large otters come up as well too, and they both flee back into the ocean. But what's interesting about this, again, this is not ancient history. This is a fairly modern account. And on her tomb in Ireland, on her gravestone, you can actually see an image of this very large otter that's carved on her tombstone. Is it possible there's another creature out there that we have an idea about, but we just don't want to accept it? Is it possible there's a giant otter out there? It's possible. We know that down in the Amazon, there's otters out get down there to be about 9 feet long, and otters can be very mean, nasty creatures as well too. So there's all these different types of theories are going on about what could be in the depths of those waters.
Yeah. Now, if you could pick one, Bessie, Champ, Nessie, which has the strongest historical case behind it and why?
I would think as we go forward here, that's a very good question. I'm going to say Lake Superior because it has such uh, a tradition in the native population around there. Like I said, it's almost deified. It's the god of the water, and even whenever the Edmund Fitzgerald sank, there were whispers among the local population up around Lake Superior that it might be one of these monsters that actually pulled these sailors down to their watery depths. So there's still this notion that there's something still out there. And because we have rock art that is exhibited in that area, and because we have the sheer depth of Lake Superior as well, and there's ways in and out, so you don't have to have a constant population there. I'm going to say that there's probably something in Lake Superior and that's probably been in there for a while. People have been seeing it for a while.
Yeah, I would agree that, especially with the painting, the
Oh,
yellow.
absolutely. Absolutely. And we also know that there's a lot of fish in there too. So it's not like Loch Ness, and we know Loch Ness is not a very high producing lake for fish. The fish come in and everything like that, but we don't have a huge population of fish there. But at Lake Superior, you do. And if something is predatory, it's very easy to go from Lake Superior into Lake Michigan, into Lake Huron, so you have this massive amount of space and also the periphery as well too. If this is an animal that's able to get out of the water as well and become terrestrial, we have a lot of space around there as well too. So it really makes it for the perfect storm for some sort of strange creature to exist in that particular environment.
Yeah. Now, virtually every culture on Earth across lakes, rivers, and oceans has a water monster tradition. As someone who studied the historical and psychological roots of these legends, what does the patterns tell us?
It tells us that we as human beings we are rather incredulous whenever it comes to the idea of spirits inhabiting certain things. So we talk about the animus, right? We talk about the idea of anima, this kind of enlivening force that we find in shamanistic cultures and such. But we see that the world around us is alive. The water, the mountains, the stones, even Mount Denali in Alaska is said to be godlike. And we have a fascination, we have an awe for the sublime in nature. And in order for us to deal with the unknown, and in order for us to reconcile ourselves with it, and in order to commune with it, sometimes it's better to personify it as well too. And then once that's done, then it becomes something that we can deal with, right? So people have talked about again Lake Superior, Lake Michigan. There's been stories about the native populations driving animals out as sacrifices or offering maidens up as sacrifices to these monsters. And that's probably not true. That's probably definitely a European slant on this, but it goes to show you that there was an awe there to the native population, that they believed something was in that water, that if they were able to appease it, it would be better for them. It's this way of dealing and negotiating with the world around them because we all want to do that, right? Because nature gives and nature takes away. And whenever you're around water like that, you're dependent upon not only for drinking water, but for food and for transportation and everything else. So to say that there is a deity in that water and that I, as a regular, normal human being, have a way to commune with that deity and hopes that somehow I will be blessed by it. That's just a human imagination and a human assumption that we want to make. And I think that's what happens whenever we talk about all kinds of things. When we talk about the Yeti in Nepal, this is a spirit. This is a conduit between two different worlds. And so too is the lake monster, especially whenever we get into the indigenous imaginations.
Yeah. Now, lake sturgeon keep getting cited as the rational explanation for most freshwater sightings. You've done your deep research. Does that answer satisfy you?
Oh no, absolutely not. Because they do look reptilian. So do alligator gar. There's no reason why alligator gar can't get in there either. And these can be quite large fish, and they have a very reptilian looking snout that's just rows of teeth. So it looks almost like a little alligator swimming around. Or in the case of a very big alligator gar, a very big alligator swimming around. But there's not that animation that you see in fish that has been prescribed to these creatures. You don't see them leaving the water. You don't see the neck. You don't see the classic humps. You don't see any of the kind of. So some of these things are even said to have horse-like manes or two little horns on the top of their head. You do not see these things within the sightings of these fish. Although I think a lot of the legends probably do come from that. We also have paddlefish as well too that have these great kind of shovel noses. So there's a lot of strange fish in and around the Great Lakes that would be monsters to anybody that's not familiar with them, right? If you encountered an alligator gar up close and personal, you probably would think, if you did not have any kind of conception of these creatures, that what you saw is a monster because it doesn't make any sense. It looks like a chimera. It looks like a lot of different things thrown together, but it really is a genuine fish. But I think there's enough to be said from the record that what we're dealing with, especially with people that know what the indigenous, what the native population of fish is in those areas, and they say, no, that's not it. That's when we have to look for another definition for what's going on there.
Yeah. Now, have you ever personally came across a sighting account, one specific case that you generally couldn't explain away?
The first time I was at Lake Huron, and this was right towards sunset, and the water was pretty flat. And I see this very large shadow moving maybe 10 feet offshore. And I thought, this is as lucky as I'm going to be able to get because I'm thinking that I'm in the sight of a sea monster, right? Or a lake monster. And it gradually moves away. And the creature was so big, it was just a big blob shadow that was moving. And then I asked some people that were local, and they said that it was probably a steelhead salmon. Again, I was very new to this. This is whenever I was the first time I was up at Lake Huron. I think I was 23. So I really didn't have that kind of working knowledge about the fish. And it was like if I were seeing an alligator gar, I had no idea what I was looking at. I just saw a very large animal that didn't make any sense to me moving through the water. But whenever I spoke to the locals, I found out that these very large fish, these steelhead salmon, are quite common to the area. So I saw just something there. But from my point of view, my very urban point of view, it didn't make any sense. So I made it into a monster. But that's about the only thing. And I do frequent lakes a lot. I do frequent oceans a lot, but I never had, and I don't go out on boats very much either. I don't have any kind of a connection to any kind of sonar or anything. And there's people out there like Katie Elizabeth that's up there researching Lake Champlain and doing a lot of really good research. But unfortunately, I don't have the wherewithal to do that kind of stuff. So I will glean what I can off of the reports made by these other boots on the ground researchers, or should I say, boots in the water researchers.
Yeah, very true. So, what do investigators, of lake monsters consistently get wrong when they approach these lake monster cases?
Yeah. The number one mistake is going in there saying that lake monsters don't exist. So I already have an agenda going in, and then my agenda is to find out what takes the place of that monster. When in fact, we should all go in there and say, something unexplained has been reported there. Let's see what kind of information we can gather from that particular area and see if we are onto something that is not cataloged by science. That's the way I look at all this kind of stuff. If it's something in there that shouldn't be in there, then it will be found out. But we have to go in there with at least an open mind so we can look at places we don't normally look. And if we do gather evidence of something that doesn't make sense, we don't throw it out just simply because it doesn't make any sense to you as a researcher.
Yeah, very true. So I had just a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What are you working on next, and what should people be watching for from you coming out
Okay.
soon?
Yeah. So what I'm working on right now is looking into the uncanny valley right now. And this was a proposal brought up by a scientist when we talk about AI, that artificial intelligence and computers and things like that are producing images of human beings that make us take a bit of a pause because we as human beings are unsure about things that resemble us, but isn't quite us. So, what I did is by extension, I'm looking at the uncanny valley from a historical perspective and suggest that one of the reasons why we have that innately within us is because we, in our ancient past, have encountered hominins that we simply do not understand, whether they be giants or what have you. And that is part of the uncanny valley. When we encounter something that's very much like us, but not us, it gives us pause because there's inherent danger within that particular encounter. So that's what I'm working on right now is my research into the uncanny valley.
Oh, very nice. Now, are you going to be any upcoming Paracons or
I
Crypto?
am. So I'll be at Forest County Paracon in Pennsylvania the second week of June, and I will actually be presenting on the Uncanny Valley there. So that will be its world premiere there. If you want to come on out and hear it, I would love to see you. And like I said, that's in Forest County. And then the third week of August, no, I'm sorry, the second week of August, I'll be up in Quebec, Canada. My first time in Canada at a Bigfoot conference up there as well too, and I'll be speaking on. So I'm not sure what I'll be speaking on about that yet, but those are the two big ones I'm looking forward to right now.
Oh, very nice. And if anyone wants to check out your books or learn more about you and I know you've written on various subjects. What's the
I have. Yeah. Yeah, you can go to my website, www.ron-cryptoguru.com. You get my email there, all that other kind of stuff. Keep in touch with me. Or you can go to Amazon. Everything's done on Amazon. Ronald L. Murphy Jr. On Amazon. You can find all my books there. And like I said, you go hop over to my website and then we can chat as well.
Sounds great. And I'll put all your details in the description. I want to thank you, Ron, for coming on tonight. And
It's my pleasure. Yeah, I enjoy every time I'm on here with you, and I apologize that I'm not on here more often, but I really learn a lot from you as well too. You have great questions, and let's do this again.
Oh, yes, I'd love to have you back on it. There's so many topics we could go into.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
And now the past may be gone, but its spirits live on. Thank you for everyone for joining me on this haunted history adventure. If tonight's deep dive left you wanting more, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We drop new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday right here on The Common Historian. And if you want to go deeper into Rand's research, I've linked all to his books, his website, all that in the description below. And he also has his book on aquatic monsters of the Great Lakes, and I'll put that direct link in the description as well. Grab a copy. I think it's fascinating. Drop your comments below. Which lake monster do you think has the strongest case? I make sure I read every single one of the comments. Until next time, keep digging into the darkness.